Solitude, the high cost of admission to peace and sovereignty, written and narrated by Peter J. Merrick. This morning, I woke up before sunrise, poured myself a coffee, grabbed a notepad, and walked down to the harbor. I live about a quarter mile inland from San Diego Bay, and most mornings I make the same walk. The city is quiet. The tourists are still asleep. The boats gently rock with the tide. The restaurants have not opened yet. Nobody is asking me for anything. Nobody needs a decision. Nobody needs a solution. Nobody needs me to fix a problem before I have even finished my first sip of coffee. 10 years ago, that probably would have made me uncomfortable. This morning, it felt like wealth. That realization surprised me because for most of my adult life, I was moving. I was building businesses, raising children, writing articles, speaking, teaching, solving problems, and creating responsibilities faster than I could eliminate old ones. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if I was living my life or simply participating in a 30-year group project that nobody remembered volunteering for. Like many men from my generation, I followed the script. I worked hard, got married, raised children, built a career, saved money, worried constantly, and somehow developed mysterious aches and pains that appeared overnight and then became permanent roommates. That was basically adulthood, and honestly, I was pretty good at it. Then life happened. A 20-year marriage came to an end. My children grew up, the house became quieter, and suddenly I found myself living alone in San Diego. Now, if you had told the 20-year-old version of me that one day I would be living alone by the ocean, taking long walks with a notepad, writing books about life, and voluntarily thinking about consciousness, purpose, and peace, I probably would have assumed you were describing somebody who had suffered a minor head injury. Back then, my life was all motion. Build, produce, achieve, repeat. If somebody had told me I would spend part of my morning sitting quietly by the water, thinking about the meaning of life, I would have politely nodded and then immediately gone back to worrying about deadlines, business growth, and whether I was somehow behind in a race nobody had actually explained to me. That last one took me years to figure out. Somewhere along the way, I realized I spent a surprising amount of my life feeling behind. Behind who? I honestly have no idea. The strange part is that most of the people I thought were ahead of me were privately wondering if I was ahead of them. It turns out a lot of us are running around comparing our lives to people who are busy comparing themselves to us. Human beings are funny that way. At first, I thought solitude was something you endured, kind of like airport security, assembling furniture from A.K.A, or trying to remember 17 passwords that all require one capital letter, one symbol, one number, and apparently a sample of your DNA. You simply survived it and hoped something good would be waiting on the other side. What surprised me was that the silence eventually stopped feeling uncomfortable and started teaching. Over almost the past 4 years, I have spent more time in my own company than at any other point in my life. During that time, I wrote 5 books, including one that unexpectedly became an international bestseller. I started new projects, finished old ones, let go of a few identities that no longer fit, and somewhere in the middle of it all, I started asking myself questions I did not even know I had. You would think a man in his 50s would know what questions he has. Apparently not. Some of the biggest questions in my life had been sitting quietly in the basement, waiting for me to slow down long enough to notice them. And the silence showed me how much of modern life is noise. It showed me how many people are terrified of being alone with their own thoughts. Most importantly, it showed me how many of us spend years trying to become somebody while never taking the time to discover who we already are. For years, I believed peace was waiting somewhere in the future. One more achievement, one more success, one more book, one more conference, one more accomplishment, one more miracle diet that promised I could eat cheesecake while somehow becoming healthier. That one turned out to be complete nonsense. The problem was that every time I reached a destination, another destination appeared behind it. Success has a nasty habit of moving the finish line. Peace does not. As I sat by the harbor this morning watching the water, I found myself laughing at how much my definition of freedom has changed. For most of my life, I thought freedom meant having more money, more opportunities, more choices, more success, more everything. Now I am not so sure. I think freedom might actually be needing less validation, less attention, less proving, less drama, less noise. The older I get, the more suspicious I become of anything that promises happiness while requiring exhaustion. There is a quiet strength that begins appearing when a man learns to enjoy his own company. He stops negotiating with loneliness. He stops chasing people who are running away. He stops explaining his value. He stops accepting chaos simply because he fears being alone. Instead, he begins protecting his peace. That does not mean becoming isolated or cynical. It simply means that anyone who enters your life must bring something meaningful to a life that is already working. That is a very different standard. My life today is not perfect. I still lose my keys. I still occasionally walk confidently in the wrong direction. I still go grocery shopping and return home with everything except the one thing I originally went there to buy. I still walk into rooms and forget why I entered them. At my age, that could be wisdom or it could be something else. The jury remains out. But despite all of that, I genuinely enjoy my life. I enjoy my walks. I enjoy my writing. I enjoy my friendships. I enjoy my children. And perhaps most surprisingly of all, I enjoy my own company. That took me over 5 decades to learn. As I finished my coffee and started the walk back home, I realized something. For years, I thought solitude was the price I was paying after the end of a marriage. I thought it was the penalty. I thought it was the thing I needed to endure until the next chapter arrived. What I finally understand is that solitude was never the punishment. It was the gift, because solitude gave me something I did not even know I was searching for. It gave me sovereignty. The silence was not showing me what was missing. The silence was showing me what remained. What remained was a man who had survived success and failure, marriage and divorce, good decisions and spectacularly bad ones, victories, disappointments, and more than a few moments where he was absolutely certain he knew what he was doing while clearly having no idea whatsoever. What remained was enough, more than enough. And perhaps that is the ultimate reward waiting on the other side of solitude. Not isolation, not withdrawal, not escape. Peace and earned self-respect. Peter J. Merrick, A.K.A. Old Fart. Discovering that solitude was never the price of peace. It was the path.